Well, firstly, he was the incomparable artist that is Bob Dylan and the enormous legacy he's left behind. And also that before I even had jumped into the project in its entirety, I felt he was leaving behind a roadmap for other artists, really, because I'm an actor and I'm not a musician, to follow, and I found that to be tremendously inspiring. After that, of course, it was James Mangold and the incredible script he wrote. And ultimately it was this 5.5-year process that gave to me more than I feel like, more than anything I ever worked on, you know, it was the gift that kept on giving to this day. So there were a lot of factors that went into it, but principally it was the man, the myth, the legend, Bob Dylan, and wanting to be a part of his worldview.
Good luck for the Oscars. You're playing a Bob Dylan who uncompromisingly chooses his individual art. Do you consider it is advisable to, like Dylan did, separate aesthetics and activism? And is that possible for artists that want to be responsible in these troubled times?
Wow. That's why it's so good to come to Europe, man, because the questions are so much better out here. So much better. I mean, look, he left behind a complicated legacy in that regard, because I think he was sort of, this is nothing new to say that he sort of resented or was in tension with the fact that he was labeled a savior of his generation, and he made music and art that was so thoughtful in the early 60s, but as the Woodstock generation came to fruition in the late 60s, he didn't go to Woodstock, you know, and he was making Nashville Skyline and Blonde on Blonde in a period where Joan Baez and figures like that were going to protests and marches. So to answer your question directly, I think, how did you say it? You said to divorce aesthetics from the nature of your art, of activism. Yeah, if we're talking in the language of Bob Dylan, I think he definitely did. I mean, his music spoke for itself. My theory on it, my interpretation, and I can't speak for Bob because he's alive and well in Malibu, so he could tell you better than I could. My interpretation is that topical songwriting, political songwriting, was a texture for him to express himself through in the early 60s, mid-60s. In that rock and roll, bringing it all back home, Buddy Holly, Little Richard, Elvis Presley, those are the people he initially aspired to be. Once he was in a position where he could get a band, and once he was in a position where culturally the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Kinks were taking over, I think in many ways it wasn't as complicated as political activism. I think it was just more fun to have a band and to play rock and roll. And if you look at all of Bob's legacy, I won't bore everyone with a history class, but he really went out of his way to not be pinned down as an activist. So, you know, I was never academic in my preparation for this role. It was all by osmosis. I just lived in this material endlessly, day and night for 5.5 years, not as an obligation, not as work, but because Bob Dylan, the man, the artist, became a shining light for me and has guided me to this day. The individuality and the refusal to be a part of the mess. I don't know how it would have changed me, because the truth is, I'm not even really, this is the truth, is I'm not interested in how it changed me or even explaining how it changed me, in as much as I know it did. And the way it did wasn't academic. And so much of the pressure in Hollywood or in show business is like, people want you to know where you're at, including Bob Dylan. You watch the press conferences he did like today. I was excited to come here today because I don't have Jim Mangold and Elle Fanning and Edward Norton and Monica do all the talking myself. You know, this was an interesting project for me where I knew the experience I had making it would never compare, rather, the experience I would have watching it or putting it out in the world would never compare to the experience making it, because I had such a magical time making it, you know. And this is probably the last time I'll probably talk about it. This is the last word. That was my thought before I got here, you know, because I've been going around the world talking about this for 2 months, but I just love this man so much, and I love this movie so much, I would do it for a year. I really would. This was a lifetime's work. This was a spirit being. I was at the Santa Barbara Film Festival the other day, and then they were saying, they were being very nice, and they said, this is the beginning of a long career, and you got so many great things ahead of you. I was like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if I got a lot more of these in me. And I'm not trying to say that in a negative sense, but I had 5.5 years to work on the great, great art of Bob Dylan, like a thinker that is the thinker of the 1960s, and that was a time period where you just stepped outside and things were innovative. Those people and thinkers exist today. You just got to find them in the cracks a little bit more. And I had an excuse to study this man in this period for 5.5 years. Like, what a gift. These things are harder to come by. If you look at like in the late 90s or the 2000s, the amount of whatever the word is, like artsy or a movie like Rounders with Edward Norton, that kind of movie.
Yeah.
Like they don't really make those anymore. So if you get an opportunity to work on something like this, it's a total blessing, and I'm just couldn't be more grateful. It's the last word, but like I could talk about it endlessly. I'm incredibly grateful to Bob Dylan. I'm incredibly grateful to Mangold, to Searchlight for this opportunity. I'm grateful to the Berlin Film Festival for platforming this movie, and I hope the next time I'm here it's something that says worthy. If people haven't seen it, I hope you guys feel like it is, but I could tell you from the work put in and the drive and the reasons it was made and the fact that it invites you in the tent, it doesn't push you away with its pretension. It's going, hey, we invite you in. I'm like so proud of this.